Hello and welcome to our webinar today on CMMC Level 1. I'm Scott Dawson, President of Core Business Solutions. We are very glad you are with us. I know that if you're tuning in today, you've probably been reading about this certification for cybersecurity that's coming down the road. You may have even been asked by a client or a customer to look into getting certified, or maybe you're just trying to get ahead of this thing before it's the last minute to get it done. But regardless of where you are starting from, I'm glad you're here. We're glad that we're going to be able to spend this hour together. I believe this will be very informative for you, particularly with regard to what does all this mean and where do I get started. But before we begin, I want to thank all of our co-sponsors who have invited all of you to join us. And as I look through the names of those who have co-sponsored this session, there are folks from Ohio, New Jersey, Montana, Delaware, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Tennessee. So if you're from one of those states, you probably have been invited by one of these friends of ours. Otherwise, we are glad you are here. You may even be a customer of Core Business Solutions and you received the invitation. But we're thrilled to have you here. A large group of folks here. Actually, I was surprised the registration. So there must be a lot of interest. With that, let's look at the agenda for today. We are really going to touch on 4 different areas. We'll start with just a brief introduction of CMMC. I'll call that CMMC Review, because you may have heard some of these basics, but I'm not going to assume that you have. So we're going to lay out some of the terminology and some of the background as to why this certification is coming out from the Department of Defense, give you a little bit of context along those lines. And then I'll have a special guest joining us for that second point, the CMMC Level 1 requirements. I'll introduce him in a few minutes. Then we'll talk about certification. So certification refers to how do you actually get certified? Is there an audit or an assessment involved? What are the steps really to be prepared for that certification? And then we will have time for question and answer. So please feel free to use the Q&A button on your Zoom controls. If you would, please use the Q&A for your questions. That way, Miss Maddie, who's in our control room here today in the studio, she can be watching for your questions, make sure she draws my attention to them as we go, or we can hold those to the end, and there will be some time, hopefully, that we will be able to address your questions. So with that, let's start with the CMMC review. All right, well, to begin with, what is CMMC? What does it stand for? And it is the acronym for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So let's parse that out just a little bit. It is a formal certification process, a lot like an ISO 9001 or AS 9100 certification, where you have a set of written requirements, or there's a standard, and in this case there is. Then there's a preparation for an audit, and in this case there is also an audit, though it is called an assessment for CMMC. And by the way, it is something you have to maintain. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but it is a formal certification. It is a maturity model. All right, what do they mean by that? What they mean by that is, for some companies, there's maybe a lower bar to hit. Because of the nature of information that you handle, you may not need to secure your network and your organization as much as if you had very highly sensitive information that you handle. So you could imagine, as an example, even a classified program in the federal government, right? This is not classified. These are unclassified documents. So it's not referring to a classified program, but you can imagine a classification would mean that you're handling very sensitive national secrets, right, that you need to protect. So the security requirements in that case would be very strict. Now, we're a step back from that. This is not a certification that prepares you for a classified program with the government. It's an unclassified program, but that doesn't mean there aren't degrees of criticality or sensitivity to various types of information that is disseminated throughout the defense industrial base. The defense industrial base being all the contractors, subcontractors, prime contractors that make up the 350,000 companies nationwide that supply to the Department of Defense. So the maturity model basically says that some of those companies, maybe even the majority, have very low-level security requirements. That doesn't mean zero, just means lower level. That means, and others, maybe there's some specialized companies that handle very sensitive information. So there are different levels of certification. That's one aspect of this maturity part of the standard. We'll look more at that here in just a moment. And it also is focused on cybersecurity. What does that mean? We hear a lot about cybersecurity in the news, but let me boil it down. It basically means protecting information that shouldn't escape your control, right? So it's protecting information from people who shouldn't see it. It's protecting information from an intruder that might want to steal it or compromise that information. In the Department of Defense, you certainly understand that the products and the manufacturing that goes on within the defense industrial base ultimately becomes the equipment and the systems that are used by our soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen in defending our country. So this is a national security issue to protect information as that information is disseminated for the manufacturing of products and systems for the Defense Department. So cybersecurity is vital for your company, but this program is not designed specifically to protect your company information, though it could have that as a side benefit. Its primary purpose is to protect the information specifically related to your government contract, okay? We'll talk more about that. Now, CMMC certificate is actually issued by an assessment organization, independent auditing company called a CMMC, Third-Party Assessment Organization, or otherwise known as a C3PAO. That sounds a whole lot like R2-D2 is his best friend on Star Wars, right? Sounds a little bit like that. That's not really what it's referring to. But the C3PAOs are the assessment companies that are qualified by the Department of Defense to provide a certified assessor to your organization to do the audit, and then the C3PAO would then approve the results of that audit and your certificate would be issued. Again, works a lot like an ISO 9001 certification process, though the players are different, right? Those are auditors and registrars or certification bodies. But this is equivalent in that respect. It's set up in a similar fashion. There are 5 levels of certification. The lower level, less sensitive information, would be level 1. The highest level would be level 5, and then 3 other levels in between. We'll look at those here in a moment. Once you're certified for a period of 3 years. So the assessment occurs, you pass the audit, get the certificate, and then that certificate will be valid for a period of 3 years, at which time you'll be assessed again. A little bit different than ISO, right? ISO is a 3-year certificate, but there are annual surveillance audits, right? So there's an auditor coming to your facility every year for an ISO certification. In this case, it's only every 3 years. Isn't that good news? I'm trying to find some good news here, okay? The level specific to your organization will ultimately be specified in your customer's contract. So if you work, say, for example, directly with a prime contractor, in that contract, it'd be a subcontractor in this case, right? In that subcontract where they're basically pushing work to you or hiring you to do work, in that contract, it will specify the certification level that's required for that contract. If you're working directly for the DoD, again, the level will be specified in the contract. That means that some companies might find some of their contracts state one level, other contracts state another level. in order to be qualified for those contracts, you'd have to have the higher level certification. But today we're going to talk about the first level, that level 1 certification. By the way, everything that's in level 1 applies to all the other levels because they're cumulative. So this webinar here today is for everyone, all 350,000 companies. Now, I don't think we had 350,000 in today's session, but they'd be welcome if they wanted to come next time. Something less than that are here today. All right, the audits will begin this year, okay, a little bit later this year, probably in the fall would be what we're expecting the very first audits to be done. But again, 350,000 companies have to get certified by 2026, so it's going to be a gradual process as they roll it out. All right, hopefully that gives you some of the background. Now, the objectives of all this, as I mentioned, there's a national security aspect to this, right? It's not letting our nation's adversaries get their hands on the specs, the drawings, the technical information regarding the equipment and systems that our soldiers are using on the battlefield, right? So protecting that information so they can't defend themselves or be aggressive against our equipment and systems in a way that they would have an advantage because they would know what's under the hood, right? We need to protect what's under the hood. That means protecting all this documentation during the manufacturing process. So it's to protect that sensitive defense information. It also is to have one certification that is good for all branches of the Department of Defense, right? Whether you're working for the Army or the Navy or the Coast Guard, you'd have one, CMMC would be accepted in all those contracts, and you wouldn't have to have a different certification for different branches of the DoD. I believe there is talk that eventually other agencies, other parts of the federal government might also adopt CMMC. So you may find 10 years from now, perhaps, I'm just guessing here, but that CMMC is needed for any federal contract. It's not true today, right? It's only Department of Defense, which is 2/3 of the federal government spend, right? So most of it, but not all. All right, and then there's a goal to verify and sustain cybersecurity through the assessments. I mentioned there are 5 levels. Level 1, there are 17 requirements or what they call practices, okay? Individual line items. We'll talk more about those 17 requirements here today. A level 2 certification would include those 17 plus 55 more, if I did the math right, to make a total of 72. So those 72 practices in level 2 include the 17 from level 1. Level 3 has 130, which includes level 1 and 2, and so forth, okay? The more sensitive the information, the higher level of security required. That's why you see the difficulty, and I will say also the expense, goes up as the certification level increases, okay? But that first level of certification, everyone has to pass through that gate, or at least put those 17 practices in place on their way to level 2 or 3 or whatever. But its purpose is to protect a certain kind of information, and that's called Federal Contract Information, or otherwise known as FCI, okay? That FCI refers specifically to, and I'll just read the definition here, information not intended for public release that's provided or generated for the government under a contract, okay? That would be any information being exchanged with the federal government or received by the federal government pertaining to the contract. That could be schedules, could be past performance, could be employee resumes, could be financial information, anything that shouldn't be posted out on Facebook or something, right? Shouldn't be out in public. It should be remain private. Associated with that contract is FCI, okay? So some examples would be things like contract performance reports or process documents or response to a proposal, email exchanges with the DoD pertinent to a contract, okay? I'm going to just say this is the day-to-day correspondence and documentation that is made, that is part of all government contracting. If you're working within the defense industrial base and a contract's related to the DoD, that is considered FCI, and it needs to be protected using the 17 practices of Level 1 CMMC certification. I hope that's clear as mud, okay? So it is not intended to protect your employee personal information. It's not intended to protect your company financials or your sales information or even information from other customers outside the DoD. It's not related in any fashion to this other information that is, to your company, highly valuable, but to the DoD, not within scope, okay? The only thing within scope is related to that contract, and that's the FCI. Now, if a company is actually doing manufacturing or dealing with technical documentation, they would need to jump from Level 1 up to Level 3, okay? That is the protection of what they call CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information, okay? Controlled Unclassified Information could be produced by the DoD and transmitted to your company to do some manufacturing, perhaps, or testing, or whatever the service, what it is you're providing. So it could be generated by the DoD and passed down, could be generated by a contractor and returned back to the government as part of a deliverable within your contract. But regardless of who produces it, if it's related to technical information, it is considered CUI, okay, Controlled Unclassified Information. Some examples. Information, personally identified information of personnel working on the contract, okay, not personnel not working on the contract, personnel related to the contract. It could be personnel, the government personnel. You need to protect their information. Could be your employees. Could be third parties, but protecting that PII. Engineering drawings. Well, that one seems sort of obvious, right? You wouldn't want an adversary to get their hands on engineering drawings for a weapon system that they're trying to defend against. Otherwise, they could reverse engineer it, right? We wouldn't want that. Manual standards, process sheets, data sets, software code and source code. Anything that's related to the tech, if it describes the technical aspects of a product or a system, or a weapon system, well, that's redundant, I suppose, then it is technical in nature. That then is considered CUI, and a few other things are CUI. But if you were handling CUI, you would have a Level 3 certification. That webinar is for another day. In fact, we did a webinar last month, I believe, on Level 3 certification, I believe, but I know we have one coming up. So if that is if you're saying, I'm in the wrong webinar today, oh no, I'm supposed to be in the Level 3 webinar. Don't worry, everything we're talking about today is relevant, right? This is preparation for Level 3, but you'll want to watch for the calendar on our scheduled events. I'll explain that here in a bit. But Level 1, Level 3, they're kind of nested within each other. There's a path. Here's a diagram to show how, as the information flows through the defense suppliers, how it then has, it determines which certification different contractors might need to receive. So let's say, for example, big corporation, let's say they're the prime contractor on a major defense contract. They then have a couple of suppliers that handle CUI. They are manufacturers, let's just say. And so CUI that's my little orange square there you can see. They have received CUI, therefore they will need CMMC Level 3, that's the green. Now, if the next level down, information is passed or exchanged with their suppliers, and some of those suppliers handle CUI, others don't handle CUI. It's only FCI. So then you might find a mix, right? Some of the suppliers needing Level 3, some needing Level 1. It's all dictated by what information is being passed, okay? What information is being handled, and that determines the level of sensitivity, which determines the level of cybersecurity required, all right? That's the logic behind it. All of this becomes clear on the day in the future when you see the level specified in your contract, because now it's black and white, right? Not just concepts, but it'll be laid out for you. But I think it's important for you to anticipate the certification level for your business that is strategic. So you may be pursuing work that would only ever need Level 1 certification. So that would be the right level to be pursuing your certification. You may be a manufacturer and you know Level 3 is in your future, so that's what you're working toward, okay? So it's all dependent on the nature of the work you do and the type of information you handle. All right, we're going to set all that background stuff aside and turn to requirements. I know this is what you guys have been excited to hear about, but I'm going to bring a good friend of mine, Mr. John Chrisley, in here to join us now. And I mentioned I was going to invite my friend John Chrisley to join us from Florida. Hello, John.
Hello, good afternoon, Scott.
It is great to have you here, John. Folks, I want to introduce John. He is our Director of Information Security Solutions. What does all of that mean? It means he works to build out our capabilities to provide security services to our clients, okay? You all may know we're a consulting company. That's what we do. We provide training and consulting on a various number of compliance areas, cybersecurity being one of those, okay? So our consultants know all about training and consulting, but we have never offered technology solutions before. But what we're finding with CMMC is that our customers need help with the security tools that are needed on their network or on their PCs or whatever in the technology space that their IT folks don't know how to do or don't have any experience with. So we're trying to fill that gap. John's come aboard to build out a team to provide security solutions. Did I get that almost right, John?
That's right, Scott. Absolutely.
I think I got it. All right. So we'll talk more about the things John is doing and how it might help you guys here in a few minutes. But John, we wanted to walk through the CMMC Level 1 practices. I hesitate to go through 17 of them today because I think when we get through number 6, eyes are going to roll. So we're going to group them, okay? So I have a diagram to share with everyone. And this is our depiction of what is involved with putting the basic cyber hygiene practices, that's the label the DoD puts on these 17 practices, basic cyber hygiene. I will say these are good for any company to protect their own information, but again, that's not the point of this certification. The point of the certification is to protect the DoD's information. That doesn't mean you can't secure your whole network, all right? But the diagram is indicating that there is this information that needs to be protected. That's this circle, okay? And that information in this case is the Federal Contract Information, or FCI, that is protected through these 4 different types of security practices, areas of security in a company's security program. Starting with the top of that list, the network protection. So, John, we're going to go through 4 of these. First one is talking about network. I think everyone understands what a network is. I doubt they know the kinds of security protections needed on a network at this basic level. So talk about some of those practices that are necessary to secure a network.
Yeah, so at a very high level, your network hopefully is protected by a firewall that's keeping people out that don't need to be in, and obviously keeping the bad people out and the bad things that are out there on the web out. So it starts sort of there as sort of a gate to a company's network as a firewall. And firewalls have to be updated from time to time and managed and updated. And so that's sort of the first piece. And that helps to limit access to the network, who can get in, and even from within, who can get out to where. For example, firewalls offer some geo-blocking. Maybe you don't want every country in the world being able to access your network or your website or your FTP server and things like that. Also within this realm of network protection, we like to talk about the users authenticating them. So this could be your Active Directory as one example, helping to identify and authenticate the users and the devices that are allowed to use your network. Maybe you don't want every device able to access network resources and get onto your network and browse around. Also, part of this network protection is also monitoring what's going on the network. Network systems like routers, firewalls, switches, servers, they talk. They They have logs. They can tell you what's going on, what's good, what's bad. If you have a system that can listen to them and understand what they're trying to tell you, this can be very good indicators of when things are going well. And you'll also hear this term, indicators of compromise, IOC. When a system is being compromised, there could be an indicator. You just have to be listening.
Yeah, John, I think those are great points for those of us who are novices and not, haven't rolled our sleeves up and even dare go in that IT closet and play with those wires. But I think if, business owners need to know that in order to be responsible according to the contract you sign with the DoD and accountable, it is important to know what actually we have to implement on our network, even if you're not a techie kind of a person, right? So one of the things that our consultants are good at, and John just demonstrated, is breaking things down into simple terms for the novices, if you will, but then go further for the technology folks, IT or an MSP, and talk to them about implementing some of these things. But I will also say, some of our customers don't have an IT guy. Some of them maintain their own network. They got the equipment, they bought it from Best Buy or something, they got it all working, Outlook's working, maybe kind of low-tech, informal kind of way they've set things up. Maybe they don't have a real high-end kind of an IT resource, internal or external. We can step into that gap through some of our services, but that network needs to go, you need to go beyond basic IT in these areas to implement security systems, security solutions that are not, they're not always implemented in every IT system by every IT person. Security is a specialized field within IT. And that's why I hired an expert in John to help us to flesh these areas of it out. And John was referring to some hardware and software things that are necessary to secure the network. So one point of that we need to get our head wrapped around is that the network itself needs to be secured, and there are items specified in the CMMC standard that the auditor is going to look for, and you might also then need to implement certain tools or software solutions or services to address those requirements. There are different ways to address them, but you have to address them. They will be audited, and they could jeopardize your certification if you don't implement them. Worse than that, it could jeopardize security on your network. So there's certification and then there's security, and those aren't always exactly the same thing. But the network needs to be protected. So John, let's go to the next one on people. So now we're in a different domain, right? We're not in the IT closet anymore. We're walking through the office or through the shop, and here are the folks who use or access the information that's on the network in their email or in a folder on the computer or whatever. The people could inadvertently or purposely jeopardize security and totally bust your network protections because of something they do purposely or accidentally, right? So people have to be within the scope of preparing for CMMC. So talk a bit about people protection.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people are probably one of, if not the most important, the second most important piece of this. Obviously, your network could be secure, but it's people who operate the computers. So computers and technology, they could be great and secure, but people come along and to your point, maybe they don't do it on purpose, but even accidentally, they could really affect the security of a company's network. I'm recalling a commercial, I'll leave the vendor out of it who was involved, but I remember a commercial years ago where the CEO's daughter brought a USB stick in and completely wiped out the security of the company network by introducing a virus into the company network. And unfortunately, that's a reality that could happen. Accidents happen.
Yeah.
Most people, unless they're disgruntled employees or have an axe to grind, they're not doing things on purpose. It could really be accidental. because maybe they're not educated, maybe they're not aware of what the right thing to do is. So this part of people protection, you'll see it here listed, awareness and training are really, really key. You cannot really expect employees to know what to do unless you've educated them on what it is that they should do, what it is you'd like them to do, how you'd like your company to operate, what is within the bounds and okay to do and what is not. And so training is extremely important piece of this. As we go down through this list, we then go into things like visitors. And you have to train your people how to deal with visitors because it's not just who should we let in the building, but if we have a contractor or a vendor, heating and AC person that needs to come in and work, should they roam around our facility unescorted, or should you be with them at all times? Every company's going to have their own rules about how they want this to work. The bottom line is you have to document this, you have to kind of do it on purpose, and you have to train your people so that they help support your security plan. They can help you a great deal. They can also hurt the security of your operation very easily. So last piece we have there is also policy for public posting of information. It's very important in the day of social networks being what they are, that your company takes a stance on what information is okay to put out there in the public realm, social sites, what can we share? And it could be as simple as something like the following. How about somebody taking a photo at work with their work background behind them, the machinery, the gear, and you never know what's behind you in a photo. I happen to have a virtual background on now, but if that wasn't on, you'd see my office behind me. What's on the walls? What's on a whiteboard? Well, you need to make sure that your employees understand what your stance is as a company about what is okay to do and what's not okay to do.
Yeah, very good, John. And this is not just an IT issue. It's an everybody issue because, or at least it's everybody supporting the defense contracts as a minimum need to be trained and aware, and the escort policy would apply to the information pertaining to those contracts. But it's good practice to just implement good cybersecurity training for everyone in all cases, but educating people in a way that they understand it and they can be more attentive to, say, phony emails that come in or whatever. And then the refresher of that training is important because things change and people forget. And in a moment's notice, and in an instant, a click of a mouse could introduce something onto your network to jeopardize security in your business. So, employees need to know what to do to support your security policies. All right. The next area of protection would be what I've referred to here as endpoint protection. So, John, quick definition from you, if you would, what an endpoint is in this illustration, and then what kind of protections are needed there.
Yeah, so endpoints could be anything that your users use, right? Laptops, tablets, even their phones at times, if you allow such a thing. And these protections we're talking about are making sure that you identify and authenticate the users of them. Make sure you understand what devices are on your network and you're allowing to be used. And make sure your employees understand what devices you allow to be used. But these devices have to be protected and updated, just like the network. It's not set it and forget it. You've got to keep these systems up to date. Everything from patches for the operating system to antivirus software. And also, let's not forget the patching of those third-party products, other things like we'll refer to things like Java and Adobe. Any of these products that are on the computer, they need to be kept up to date. You don't want any holes to be left around for a virus or a ransomware or an attacker to get into and have their way with your device. The last piece that we talk about here with endpoint security is what happens when it's time to stop using that device? How do you sanitize and or destroy the media that the data is stored on prior to disposing of it? And you also have to think about, even if we're going to reassign this device to another user, how do we sanitize? What's the process for cleaning it in such a way that maybe data can't be recovered if we're going to throw away a device? And always destruction of old devices is probably preferred so that they cannot be reused when they've exceeded their useful lifespan for your company.
Yeah, good summary there, John. And these endpoints are the things that are in our hands. These are the things that we touch with on these keyboards. They all, well, not all, but most of them interact with the network, right? Pull data from the network or send data to the network. So there's a relationship there, but the devices themselves have to be secured, and there are specific requirements around securing those endpoint devices. All right, the last area in the requirements is related to the facility, the building, the facility, the offices, the factory that you know that we work at every day, and that could be home as well. So what do we have to be thinking about with regard to facility protection?
Yeah, it's really about the security of your facility. And as we saw with the pandemic, that could be the home office. Home offices are very interesting to try to secure, but you need to think about that if you're going to have people working remotely from either shared workspaces or their home office, as to how secure and what's your clean desk policy, and does that extend to the home office or this shared workspace. But it's about controlling who has access to the facility, what happens when they do get in the facility, where can they go. Again, I talk about visitor policies. What are the policies? Do you need to be there with them at all times? Are there certain rooms that you want people to work out of, as opposed to having carte blanche to your entire facility? As is done a lot of times with auditors coming on site, you find a secure area, quiet area, and that's where you want those actions being taken. Along also with facility protection, sort of tied all the way back here to network protection, you need to think about those network jacks that are all around a lot of offices, and are they open at all times? Can I just plug into a network jack and get on a company's prime network? Or are they disabled until they're needed to be used? That's part of the facility. So all these things together make up facility protection.
Okay, great. And I think it's clear that this is a multifaceted problem, meaning there are different ways that data can be compromised. So it's not all, middle of the night hacking in from, some bunker overseas or something like this, though that happens. It's not all about an email, someone who's just trying to fool people with these emails to steal information or to lock down the network on a ransomware attack or something. It's not only about that. It is about that, but it's not only about that. It's not only about somebody stealing a laptop and getting access, though it is about that. And again, it's not only about somebody looking over somebody's shoulder in the facility or helping themselves to sit down at an open terminal and having free reign in your network. So different ways in which information can be compromised, which is why you find these different protections, or what they call practices, in the CMMC Level 1. So we're going to turn the corner to certification here next, but if you guys have questions about any of these technical requirements, and we have time to address those in our Q&A session, please throw those into the Q&A chat. I can't say that together. The Q&A button on your Zoom window, please use that, and we'll watch for those questions to address here in a few minutes. All right, with that, John, we're going to now turn our attention to CMMC certification, which I know everyone is excited about, to hear about another audit. I don't know about that. Hey, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. It's one of those things. But yeah, there is a formal certification process. Up until this point, the defense contracts have had cybersecurity requirements in them. That's been for years. There have been, in every DoD contract, some level of cybersecurity requirements contained in those contracts, but they've never had a certification required until now. So everything gets real formal real fast when certification's introduced, and it also means that those organizations that either weren't aware of the requirements in their contracts, because it's in the fine print and they didn't notice it, or they haven't really had the time or budget to implement these things and no one was really inspecting So life went on, and we maybe didn't get all 17 practices in place, right? Maybe had 13 of them or something. But there wasn't a downside per se, other than this potential risk someday there might, somebody might find out. But when there's certification requirements, as by the way, a prerequisite to receiving a contract, guess what? We got to go do our homework. We got to get caught up. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that getting caught up mode, which is why for those who are here with us today, you guys are, learning about this in the early stages. I will say today is in the early stages, which I commend you for that because you can get a jump start, all right? Now, our consulting practice, we've worked with nearly 100 companies now in these preparations. Okay, none of our customers are certified because there's no company in the world certified, and there's not been one certification audit conducted yet. Okay, that'll start later this year. But we have been helping companies prepare, and so this is the game plan in general terms that we lay out for them. So the first step would be to learn the requirements. What are the 17 practices? What are the technologies and procedures and policies and training that are needed? And how do we stack up against those requirements? So I will tell you that reading the requirements is a little bit, if you guys are church going, like reading the King James Bible in the Old Testament, and you're like trying to figure out what the these and thous mean, because it's written in government speak. Okay? And on top of that, it's government speak in tech. So, they only give you one sentence. They don't really explain themselves. 17 one-line requirements. What do they mean by this? What do they mean by that? This is why when we advise our clients, we always start with training to uncover what's the meaning and to do an assessment. How do we stand today? Do the things we have in place today meet the requirement? Don't meet the requirement? What's our game plan? What needs to be on our game plan from a technology roadmap point of view? What does that mean? It means the kinds of upgrades and changes and maybe new things implemented technologically on the network, on the devices, in order to meet all the requirements. So what's that lift, right? What are all the things we're going to have to do? And what's the budget for all of that? Because you don't want to be caught off guard with the budget side of this. Good to get that roadmap and budget done up front. That's phase one, where we learn the requirements, conduct the assessment. Phase two would be then taking that plan and now implementing it and remediating, which means making the changes, the improvements on your network and on your devices, and getting your training done, and if needed, writing policies and procedures. I will say in level one, they don't put any focus on documentation. Maybe there's one exception to that, but for the most part, there's not a lot of documents required, but you absolutely have to implement the practices, be able to demonstrate their implementation and effectiveness, and implement what I'll refer to, I'm borrowing this from ISO, management reviews, okay? So management reviews, what does that mean? It means periodically meeting together to check status, how are we doing, where do we need to go next, what are the roadblocks, staying involved, staying aware of what is implemented, and especially staying aware if in the event something happens, right? So having a regular team in management with the business owner involved is vital, and that would normally be implemented in that second phase. And then third phase is the actual certification, which might not be for your company until next year or the following year. I mean, they have until 2026 to require everyone to get there, but they will want to get a running start here, and we can expect the number of requirements to grow significantly next year as they get the first few audits under their belt. So the audit, its certification audit would be, to do another final assessment. Call it an internal audit if you're familiar with ISO. That would be a suggestion, right? To do a check, getting final preparations in place. The auditor, assessor will come and do their assessment. There will be a fee. Then their assessment's done. There might be some corrections needed. They give you a 90-day window to make corrections. Then once everything's corrected, certification is issued and you're good for 3 years, okay? And actually, it means you're good for the next day to keep the security practices in place so you stay secure, and your certificate's good for 3 years. I'm trying to keep security and certification in balance here, okay? Normally, our guidance would be allow several months of preparation, okay? Don't think this is a 2 or 3 weeks before the audit kind of thing. You won't be successful in the audit. These auditors are getting extensive training. They're being held to a very high standard, and you have to get 100% on the test. So preparation is the key. So some tips to get started here. You can go on the website, the DoD's website. We can supply you the link. I think on the PowerPoint we send to you, it has the link in there to download the CMMC standard, or what they call the CMMC model. You can download the document. It is thick, okay? It's a thick technical document. You're looking for the 17 practices for level 1, and if you read through the preamble and such, you'll be able to pick out how they identify those 17 practices. And if you want to just download the thing and read it, it's free of charge. Go for it. And then review that with your IT and your management. Go through it together. See where you think you stand. It's at least a starting point, okay? Now, we have more formal services to help you with that, more organized services that includes training and other types of things. Our consultants would be certainly glad to help you through that initial assessment, including the training and such. But that would be, some ways in which you could get started. Now, John, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here to talk a little bit about our CMMC Level 1 security services. We do help folks with consultants. We have registered practitioner consultants. John, you are one of those fancy guys with a cool logo. What is an RP, and what is is it registered practitioner? Is that the term
Yes.
they're using? Yep.
Yes.
What does that mean? What did you have to do to be qualified as a consultant?
So as a registered practitioner, I had to obtain training from the accreditation board directly that really went through, the background, the meaning, the various levels, all the way 1 through 5.
Yeah.
Because there are 5 levels, and had to understand what they're really attempting to, really the spirit behind what this is all about, and also getting way deep into the technical controls to make sure that us as consultants, we understand so that we can help advise our clients as to what's required. A registered practitioner is not an assessor. They're not, the ones that'll be out there doing the assessments. They may be part of an assessment team with those companies that are doing assessments. They will probably have registered practitioners on those teams as part of them, but they're not assessors. And so it was a really good way for us to prepare to help our clients through this journey. Some are starting at the level 1, some know that they want to be at a level 3, and some are not sure where they want to be. They just want to get started because they know that some of this ties back to NIST, and they've seen this language in these contracts, and they figure it's time to go through it.
Yeah, good. Looking to be sure that people are trained and qualified. Our organization is called a registered provider organization, RPO, and then our consultants have these RP designations. Now, we provide consulting, technical solutions, training, as we have mentioned, both for your management and staff, but also for your IT folks, so we'll help them understand. And then we are rolling out security solutions, technical solutions, John, that address a number of the technical practices, if I can coin that term, probably more related to the network and the endpoint devices that might be gaps in the current net setup, from what IT has set up. What are maybe briefly one or two examples of these security solutions that our attendees here today need to consider?
Sure. One of the first ones that we looked at that directly ties to some of the controls that you'll find in CMMC and then NIST is vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management. And what I mean by this is checking out, well, this could be your network from an outside view. So looking into your network from the outside to see how your network looks. Now, this could be your network at your office. This could include users at home. This could include, obviously, systems that you may have in a cloud service. And taking a look, not trying to exploit any weaknesses that are found, but to look and see how are they doing from a security perspective. And this is actually an important area in compliance to check, regularly check, continue to check. Patches for a lot of systems are released monthly, right? So it's important, at least monthly, sometimes more than that if they're urgent. So it's very important to have your systems checked and for you and management to be aware of any vulnerabilities. So we actually have released a vulnerability scanning and management solution for our customers, specifically designed for the SMB, the DoD contractors. Although it fits in a lot of areas, it's a focus of ours for the CMMC clientele. And we're able to check and see and work with the customer and not only dump a report over the fence to say, here's what's wrong, go fix it, but also to provide some expert services around working to explain this to management, to explain it to our customers, explain it to their IT, maybe it's even their MSP, to help see what we see from those services. Now, beyond vulnerability management, there's other services that are in the pipeline, such as penetration testing, which will actually go deeper and try to find out if somebody were to break in, where can they get to, and how secure is a network for real. One last one I'll mention is a lot of services around email security. So we talk a lot about getting that bad email that's from a bad actor. It's really not from the CEO asking you to buy gift cards or to open a document. So email phishing is another service that is part of this whole ecosystem of security solutions that you either have and you're either doing it today or you don't have, and maybe you need some help with those areas, and we're here to help.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then in addition to those technical solutions, we're available to help you guys prepare for the audit. After today's session, we're going to send out an information sheet about our CMMC Level 1 program and solutions, and our contact information is here on the screen, but you'll also have information to get in touch with us if you'd like to learn more about that. All right, before we get to our Q&A section here, I did want to allow for some time there. Let me show you a little bit about the timeline. Where are we in the journey of getting CMMC out to the market and implemented overall, big picture? The document itself was published January last year, so it's a little over a year old. In March, the organization that oversees the assessments is called the CMMC AB. They do the training for assessors, they do the certification of assessors, they monitor the certifications, so they're the oversight body, if you will. They were started in March, kind of an infamous month for anything to start, was March of 2020. Then they began training, they had to prepare the training, then they began the training for assessors in September last year. There were regulatory changes made in November called the DFARS interim rule, which basically told us that CMMC is now a legal requirement when contracts specify it in the terms of the contract. So it is now a contractual regulatory requirement for CMMC as soon as they start to roll it out through the contracts. Then this spring, which is where we find ourselves now, they're just now starting to include CMMC language in the contracts, a few of them this year. This fall, we expect the certifications to actually begin, and then the next 5 years, it'll roll through the whole defense industrial base. So that's where we are with regard to process. Final thing we'll touch on here, a little bit about cost, because I have heard so much concern about, is this even a good business decision to continue working with the DoD if they're going to push all these costs down to their suppliers? That is an absolutely legitimate question. So let me just address that briefly here. These are some areas you're going to end up spending some money. Getting some help with preparation is likely going to cost some money. If you want someone who has the training and experience like Core Business Solutions with planning and budgeting and training and documents and assessments and all that, that could be some expense, okay? We're pretty reasonably priced, but that could be some expense. Upgrading your network, implementing some of these technology solutions. There could be some expense, would likely be some expense around those upgrades and enhancements on your technical systems. Time to prepare, be involved in training, be involved in meetings, be involved in all the different steps, and being involved in the assessment. That time away from work is going to be a cost, maybe a hidden cost. The assessment itself, you know, it's likely going to be a full day audit, even for the smallest companies for CMMC Level 1. The cost of that audit has yet to be, published. Is there going to be bids that come out of these auditing firms? I would guess by the time you pay for everything associated with that assessment, you're in the $3,000 to $5,000 range for that one line item. I think it's good to get sticker shock out of the way. So I think that would be expected for those fees for that item. And then maintaining all of this, there's going to be expense. So we have a webinar that we do specifically on CMMC costs and breaking this all down into budgeting and that type of thing. That I'd encourage you to join us when we announce the budgeting webinar that we produce. That's one of the more popular ones, only because people want to know. So, all right, John, that brings us to questions and answers. And so, Miss Maddie, I am going to rely on you to give us a bit of guidance here. And I see you sent me a note. There are a few questions, so we're ready.
Yeah, so we have quite a few questions, but no worries. If we don't get through all of these, we will send you the answers via email. So one, could you explain what the real difference between a registered practitioner and a certified professional? In what scenario would or should you be a registered practitioner or a certified professional?
Yeah, certified professional is a training module that they have yet to release. It has not yet been released. They've done provisional training for the practitioners and the assessors. They put together their initial training and published it so they could get started, but there's a more formal way they're going to roll out the training under this structure of a certified practitioner. I think I got that right. And certified professional, I'm sorry. That'll be the entry-level training, the label they give to the entry-level CMMC training when that is published. It hasn't yet been published. Both of them, the certified professional training would give you the opportunity to become a registered practitioner or go on and become a certified assessor. So it's just different training paths, but only one of them is available today.
So is there a regulatory checklist that can be used for the audit, or is that information spread through FARS or DFARS?
Yeah, if you want to know what the auditors are looking for in the audit, there's a document called the CMMC Assessment Guides. The same link that we send you guys to download the CMMC model, that same page has assessment guides for level 1 and level 3. You can download those and it gives you in detail the criteria that the assessors will use in their audits. That would be where I direct you.
So can a management review be a part of your 91,000 or 91,010 regular management reviews?
Yes.
Or must they be done separate?
No, the management reviews for CMMC are not required. they're advised by us. We're saying it's best practice to be involved, and using a management review is a good way to do that. I would tag it onto my ISO or AS management reviews as another agenda item and just deal with it there.
All right. We have time for one more.
Okay.
Do you need an active VPN and a two-factor authentication for this level of CMMC certification?
All right, John, I'm going to test your memory on the 17 practices. VPN, do you remember if VPN is a requirement for level 1? I'm thinking no.
I don't think it's called out, but I think there's probably more detail in that question that we could follow up on later.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, network protection is part of it. So VPN is part of your network. It definitely is something that needs to be looked at depending on how, the person with the question has implemented a VPN.
Yeah.
Obviously, a best practice for VPNs in general going forward is going to be with two-factor authentication for the user, not just relying on a username and password. But the rest of that would take a little bit scenario-based. I'd want to know a little bit more.
Yeah. Miss Maddie, if you have contact information for that individual, if you would get that to John and he can connect with them, we can get them some more information. Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, guys. We will address any other questions you have sent in through email and get back to you on that, or even arrange a time to talk. We're happy to do it. With that, let's just close by showing you our schedule for upcoming webinars. But I would like to go off script here for a moment, Miss Maddie. Don't get me in too much trouble here. I told you guys to use Q&A, but if you'd use the chat feature, we're going to leave the meeting open for a few extra minutes here. But if you have topics of interest that go beyond these 3 sessions we're scheduling for the fall, we have one on CMMC Level 3, we have one on CMMC costs, we have one on technologies, okay, popular topics. If you have other topics that maybe this summer you would like us to do some mini webinars, right? And you'd like us to invite you guys in chat or later in email, please let us know, and we will see if we can't get some more events scheduled this summer. I realize there's a lot of time between here and September, and there may be some things you guys would like to know in the meantime. So chat your ideas there or email. And in fact, X, if we put up that last slide, our contact information is there. John and I would be glad to correspond with you guys, connect with you. And with that, I think that brings us to the conclusion. John, I want to thank you for joining us here today very much. And for those of you who registered and have made it to the end, thank you very much. We wouldn't be doing this without you. Well, we might be, but wouldn't be as much fun. But great to meet all of you virtually. Glad to connect with you. Let us know how we can help. And in the chat or email, let us know what else you'd like us to cover this summer, and we'll arrange to do a few more events. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.